Okay.
Well,
All right, so I'm now going to put up the agenda back on the screen.
George,
Yes, ma'am.
you're starting the recording after everyone has introduced themselves except me. But since we're segueing into the next item, I'll introduce myself and say a little bit more about how this formation came to be for the benefit of Dr. Linda, as well as others who may have forgotten. But in May of 2021, some branches went online, but we also established the Black Liberation Caucus. And we came together talking about dismantling white supremacy and will, because an incident had occurred in December of 2020 where a member of European descent called me a racist for talking about racism. And those of us in the Black movement know that sometimes that thing that's been called white fragility means we don't want to talk about race. We don't want to talk about race. We don't want to talk about our problems with race. And that was the context in which that really happened. And so it was from there that George and I realized that there was a lot of work to do in terms of just basic consciousness and awareness in this 108 plus year history of an organization that has a history of being unwelcoming to people like Fannie Lou Hamer. So that's how the Black Liberation Caucus got started. It was based on some very specific goals for building will by inviting more members of all persuasions, but specifically Black, Indigenous people of color coming together, because the Black Liberation Caucus welcomed Indigenous people of color in addition to Black members. So we would meet once a month on Sundays. And we did that for many, many months. And then it was very clear that the current president, who attacked us months after we were formed, instead of saying in the beginning, you really can't do that. But instead, she waited months after we had formed and she said, you are not a part of will. You're an illegitimate thing inside of will. And it was really quite strange because all of us are actually members of will. And so to say that you're illegitimate because you want to come together as Black people to feel safe and to talk about how you can change the bad experiences that people were having as people of color during this period. 2 staff people of color quit and called the organization racist and Darien race. Oh, a lot has happened in these 3 years. And so not even quite 3 years, but that's the background. And so, George, I'm remembering the agenda as we talked about it, but I'm using my phone, George. So what is the agenda item after the check-in, George?
The strategy chart, which I'm about to put up.
No, George, it was the BOPA. What was supposed to happen is I was supposed to do a history and background, which
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just did, but we can't do the history and background without putting up our basis of political agreement. So the BOPA has to go up before we get into the strategy chart.
Okay.
How did we actually come to be, and what did we decide we would work on? And George, since I'm using my phone, if you could read it out loud from top to bottom.
Yes. The Wilf U.S. Black Liberation Caucus Basis of Political Agreement, the BOPA. This was agreed upon beginning May 22nd, 2021. The decision-making is by consensus, by addressing questions, any concerns, and objections. The steering committee is made up of 2 representatives of African descent from each branch and meeting every month of that steering committee. Here are the areas of work identified: reparations, free all political prisoners, criminal justice reform and mass incarceration, ending voter suppression, free Palestine solidarity, the anti-racist transformation of WILF US, solidarity with other oppressed peoples of color, universal health care for all, Medicare for all, immigration justice, AFRICOM out of Africa, housing justice. And that's our BOPA.
And so, as you can see, it captures much of the work that we're already doing in WILF. But it was a way of us saying we're committed to engage with the larger movements of Black, Indigenous people of color to advance the work, and at the same time recruit and invite people to WILF. So that was our basis of political agreement. So out of that, in my usual fashion, we launched a 3-year strategic plan to carry that out. So we're actually in the last year of the strategic plan, and we're going to look at the last 18 months, actually, July of 2023 to December of 2024. So this is the last 12 months. And this kind of coincided with the term of the current president, her 3 years. And so starting in January of 2022 until December of 2024 is also, more importantly, the last 3 years of the UN decade for people of African descent. And you'll see why that is significant when we look at the goals. So George, could you read the goals out loud?
Yes, and this is for the period July 2023 to December 2024. Work on reparations ordinances in
George,
yes.
George, let me explain this. The goals were set, and we kind of worked backwards, so to speak. But this is where we want to be at the end of the 3 years. So it's not just for this period. We've been working for 2 years, some of us, to try to achieve the goals. And it should be pointed out that George's role was to work on the anti-racism transformation piece. And unfortunately, that piece didn't get much work. And my primary role was to work on recruitment and membership development. So the goals that are there are where we want to be by December of 2024. And we've used 2 years of time to work towards the goal. And at the end, goals, and at the end of this year, we'll see how well we've done. I know that on the anti-racism transformation, not much, not anything really has been done. But George, if you could read the goals, because I want people to understand. We ask ourselves the question in January of 2022, where do we want to be by December of 2024? And that's what these goals represent.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, George, if you could read them, please.
Sure. Work on reparation ordinance in 20. We've revised that to 10 branch cities with the UN decade reparations taking the lead on that or informing it. 300 new members nationwide. 20, we've revised that to 9 branches participate in the anti-racism transformation arc. which Teresa's pointed out has not had the attention or been implemented in any way that has been effective or helpful. This next column, allies and anti-racism transformation partners. This lists branch partners and individual partners. And I have to make a change right here. These are individual members who are individual allies, and they're also organizational allies. World Beyond War needs, there we go. Okay. Anything you wanted to say about this, Teresa, the transformation partners?
From the United States.
Oh, I just thought you would go across the chart.
I am. I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
No, you're the keeper of the chart. George is the one who put the template together based on what we talked about, the areas of work. And so she's been the keeper of the chart, using her skills to update it. And so we would come together periodically, as we did yesterday, to update the chart so that it's as current as it can be in this moment, which, by the way, I describe this moment as difficult. And many of you have seen what I've been writing about this difficult moment. So, George, if you could go on across so that people can see how we organize the strategic plan. And
okay, this section, resources, human publication videos, that is where art resources are. That, as Teresa pointed out, was and is my area, which has not produced in a way that was expected. I'm timing myself so that I can give you all a few minutes on why I feel like we're here and what my proposal is for going forward. I started doing some anti-racism training, although it wasn't called that, in college about 1980. And that was done solo and was very difficult for lots of reasons. In 1995, when I was working for a nonprofit here in North Carolina, we designed an anti-racism program in a team of 4 people, a gay person, a Jewish person who was white, a white-looking Latino person, and myself. And that was wildly successful, and in my mind is the blue ribbon way to do anti-oppression organizing. And it's, to me, that's a team. One of the reasons we had a gay person, a Jewish person, a white-looking person, and myself is that when done on our own, there was always that, Teresa named it earlier, that white fragility, or a way white people would wiggle out. If I call them on stuff, I was being overly dramatic or too emotional or some kind of crap, when it was real. So totally having white people face, to challenge other white people became part of the work, just as having a European Descent Allies Caucus has a value. These materials I put in here are helpful in that process. And I think the best way the work happens is by my being able to support a team of trained trainers who do that work. Okay, I'm almost done. I did work.
George,
yes.
George, if you could stop and I'll kind of take it from here, because you never did the work. And to now take up time in this meeting talking about what you did 20 plus years ago.
2 minutes and 12 seconds is what I took.
Yeah, but George, it was.
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Because the reason why I ask those of you of European descent to form a caucus, because we were told that our Black Liberation Caucus was illegitimate. And when the European Descent Allies Caucus was formed, I don't know if George noticed it, but I certainly noticed it. Darian never once said, you can't do that. And so it's the kind of thing where for people who do anti-racism work, you know when there is clearly a difference in the treatment of members. And that's what this process was all about, because I knew that Robin is a reliable ally, and I've discovered Sue and met Sue, and I do know Gloria, and I know other people. And most of the members, by the way, objected to what Darian was doing. We actually had a meeting about it to talk about it, and it was very clear that most of the members of European descent saw no problem with Black people coming together in a caucus. So we have been building will. We have recruited numerous members and built branches. So one of the things that we kind of tracked our work with is activities. And so there's a long list of activities, which I won't go through them, but these are activities that we're doing to get to meeting our objectives. And so going all the way over to the specific strategic objectives of this. And George, I'm using my phone, so I want to just cover those. And
I
then
can read. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. The strategic objectives confirm that all branches have at least 10 active ADAP members. By December 2024, WILF US board has a majority BIPOC members. No branch has less than 3 BIPOC members. WILF US participation in global efforts to end NATO increases, and WILF US participates in the WILF International Triannual discussions beginning in November.
Yeah, so these are objectives that people can easily see and that we can really focus on achieving. But where we are now in this difficult moment is, and I can't not talk about this, Robin, but the organization is in such dire shape when it comes to participation and branches dying. There are several in the leadership of WILF who think that our problems would be solved by hiring someone to fix us. And those of us who do this work of organization building know that there's no single person, especially a person who might come from outside, who can fix what's wrong with WILF. And so that's part of the discussion tonight, because I have proposed that the issue of which way forward for WILF, i.e., do we need someone to fix us, i.e., an executive director, or do we need to bottom up, build the branches, and give the branches what they need to be supported, and start new branches and try to revive the branches that went out of business? And what would that look like, and what would it take? So that's the discussion that we want to try to approach tonight, because my thinking is, as a joint group, we should be willing to advance that conversation in a democratic way inside all of WILF, so everyone can be included in the conversation. And it's not just the grass tops that are talking among themselves, but that we go to the grassroots of the organization and find out, what do you think? Ideally, that would take place at the triannual, but I really don't expect that to happen. So I'll stop talking now, and I would assume that somebody would be raising their hands or having something to say at this point. People are writing in the chat. So what are people saying in the chat?
Nobody's saying anything in the chat.
There's nothing in the chat that refers to the conversation or discussion that we're hoping to have. It refers to Dr. Ridley's book.
No, it's Dr. Ridley's husband's book, Edgar
It's
Ridley.
not my book, but my
Okay.
Sorry.
I have a
Our
question. I
Christian's
don't
book.
see any place to raise my hand, so let me know when I can.
Go ahead.
My question is, as you guys know, hi George, hi Miss Elamine, brought me on board with Wilf, and I was a little confused myself of why I was even there. So my question to you tonight, so that I can make sure that I understand that we are here because Wilf has been discriminated against Black people. Please explain to me why we, as brown people, need to be affiliated with them. Are they so powerful that we need them? I just want to understand, because I never knew who Wolf was until I met you guys.
Well, that's kind of on George, because she mentioned, but Wilf is a very important movement. It is an international movement, Trace. And those of us who have been members over the years, because it is a movement, it's only in recent years that I realized what was going on in Wilf. Because when I started out with Wilf, I was in Cleveland, and it was 2 Black women leading the branch. That was in the 80s. And I, for years, thought Wilf was a Black women's organization. When you have a movement as big as Wilf, it's got different things at different places. And so you don't really know. But institutionally, Wilf has been not welcoming. And so there's a book written about it that most of us have. There Can Be No Peace Without Freedom. The Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, 1960 to 1975. So Tracy, Fannie Lou Hamer is the poster woman for being mistreated by Wilf, because she was a sharecropper and didn't have a college degree. Wilf is very proud of talking about Coretta Scott King and about Alice Walker and people like that being members. But when it came to Fannie Lou Hamer, they shunned her. So that's the history of Wilf. But because of the power of peacemaking, and those of us who are committed to anti-war and peacemaking, we come to Wilf and we build it because we know we can make it better. And so it's not something that belongs solely to some misguided women of European descent who pop up every now and then. There have been many presidents of Wilf in the United States, some good, some not so good, and some downright bad. There's actually been a Black woman president of Wilf before. So it's not something that you could just, in a few months or a few weeks, it's over 100 years of history, Tracy. And those of us who know the whole history know that Angela Davis joined, Shirley Chisholm joined, Eartha Kitt joined, the Black women who joined Wilf in the 60s to build it. And so it's just one of those things that we're in a moment which is very difficult for the organization. And it's in large part because there is a resistance to letting go of power. There's a resistance to bringing in new people.
Resistance too.
And I would say particularly young people. And so what's happening in the branches is that they're dying off because the branches simply age out and people simply can't do the work anymore. That happened in Portland. It happened in Sacramento. It's just happening all over the country. And I've been watching it sadly And that's why we started building branches in the South to try to address the fact that the organization was dying for lack of capacity. And so somebody was saying something, was that you, Sue, about resistance? You repeated what I said. Do you object to the use of that word?
It's fine, thanks.
I thought I heard somebody repeat the word.
Okay,
What-
so Ms. Elamine, I got another question. So are we a group that has branched off from WILF? Are we a part of WILF in organizing to work with the leaders of WILF so that they could be more inclusive? Well, what are we doing? I
Well,
asked that question only because I am a boots on the ground grassroots person, you know that, here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I almost feel like I've been blackballed by the Black Caucus. So
well,
it's a
Tracy,
difficult task. That's all I'm saying, because
Tracy,
people are very
uh,
cookish nowadays.
Tracy, you are really new, and
You muted yourself, Teresa. I have a comment that's a direct response in some ways to Tracy.
Thank you. I mean, I know I'm new, but I gotta understand what I'm doing in order for me to fight with you, stand by you.
Well, one of the
Um,
things, and if Teresa is muted, I'll go ahead and answer, say the comment my hand was up for. Number one, your feeling less than welcome or anything else is my responsibility. I fell out down on the job with that. I am not excellent.
George, can you hear me?
Yeah.
That was Gloria Macmillan, and she's saying send her the login. For some reason, she can't get in.
Okay. I can do my
But
comment later.
Tracy, as depicted from the 3-year strategy, we are thoroughly committed to building will. We have recruited hundreds of members in collaboration with other branches that have been recruiting. So like I noticed Philadelphia, Greater Philadelphia, they embraced Sheila Harper, and now she's a leader in the branch. So I see branches changing. And then the Chicago branch that Gloria Macmillan is building. And so we are builders. We're builders, Tracy. The short answer to the question, because the presidents come and go. Darian, who has been objecting to our existence, we're not going anywhere. Darian will no longer be president this time next year. So I don't know what lessons she will draw from it afterwards. But I do know that an organization that has lasted this long can definitely withstand and weather any of the storms that have been happening over the last 3 years. Because from my point of view, I see people are encouraged. People are going, how could we join the Fannie Lou Hamer branch? How could we join it? That's what people are saying across Georgia. So I'm comfortable with being an organizer and doing what I'm doing. What I'm disappointed in is that the Southern Piedmont branch is kind of dying because it has no program and no activities. That's the branch you're in, Tracy, with George. And so I'm not sure what's happening with Southern Piedmont, but I know the Fannie Lou Hamer branch is trying to work in the community and do things. So that's what WILF is supposed to do, work in the communities where we live and where our branches are to try to transform things. So to answer your question, what are we doing? We're builders. We're not breaking off. We're very much a part of WILF. And as a matter of fact, at the Triannual International Congress, the Black Caucus did a workshop for people all over the world and they got to see and hear what's going on in the U.S. section. And the Europeans love to say, oh yeah, those folks in the U.S. section ain't all that. Look at how they treat those Black women. So that's what people were saying about Wilf. And so it's just sad. But in 2025, we're going to do a report back on what has happened over these years. Every 3 years, the organizations meet. So from 2022 to 2025, what has been done to change? And at the international level, they also have these problems. So in Europe and other places, so they have an anti-racism committee at the international level, Tracy. White supremacy and racism is something just in the world. So no, nobody's quitting Will. We're builders.
Okay, well, I just want to add, I mean, as you can see, I'm kind of unfamiliar with Wilf. I mean, a lot of the stuff that they sent me really just didn't interest me. This group, of course, interests me. I got a lot of respect for you, Miss Salamine, and George Friday. You know, I've walked with you with Poor People's Campaign and what have you. I just want to make sure that I can be an asset to your group and I can learn here. And I want to make sure that we're fighting for the same thing. Because white supremacy is a bad thing, but some of the things that I'm hearing, if I was a Caucasian, I would feel quite uncomfortable. So is it a women's organization for women coming together for all different types of causes and I mean issues, especially white supremacy? Because of course we need Caucasian sisters as well to fight with us against something like that. So I'm just a bit concerned, but I'm here, Ms. Salamine. I want to learn what's going on, some literature or something like that, I'm sure would help. But just to let you know, it's years, a lot going on. You know, so just know what we're doing and if it's a good cause for Black people, because right now we're suffering here. We really are.
Well, Tracy, this is a peace organization. We are fighting war and militarism. That is at the core of why Wilf exists. And everybody is affected by that. So don't lose sight of the purpose of Wilf. It started to try to stop the First World War. And every war since then, Wilf has been on the front lines trying to stop it. And as you can see, not a lot of success because we haven't built the kind of mass movement it takes to get these politicians to stop making war, but to make peace. And like Gil Scott-Heron said, the only thing with peace, only problem with peace, you can't make any money off. And the problem is all these weapons manufacturers make a lot of money off war. So that's their incentive to keep it going. And we're saying no more, no more. And we've been saying it for a long time. And as long as I've been on this planet, I've been against war since I realized it, starting in the Vietnam era when I was in my teens. So that's what we're about, stopping war. It's not about, you know, we have advancing human rights and we deal with racial justice issues, but overarching issue is we're trying to bring peace to the world so that people can have clean drinking water, they can have enough food, they can have housing, and they can have all the things they should instead of money being spent on war. That's the purpose of Wilf. So let's not lose sight of that. And if anybody wants to jump in, if I'm not captured it, feel free. And Robin, you know, you're a third generation Wilfer. So you've been in Wilfer all your life, your grandmother, your mother, and you. And so you're your Wilf in terms of the longest history of us. And so, Robin, do you have anything you want to say from your wisdom of all these generations of courage? Are you there, Robin?
Yeah, well, your initial sort of challenge when you started this conversation was the issue of sort of changing the structure of WILF now by having an executive director. Because I want to point out that virtually everyone in WILF is a volunteer, and that's wonderful. We care, we are involved, we are in our branches, we don't ask for a salary, but to be able to be more effective, we need someone who can both take a responsibility for coordinating all of the the funding and the accounting and working with the branches and helping Wilf move ahead. And in the past, we have had that. I think Madeline, no, not Madeline Reese, she was international, but Marilyn Clement was a executive director. And back in the 30s, after the end of World War I and the beginning of World War II, we had a very energetic executive director who called for and initiated a hearing in Congress about military spending in World War I, and revealing that DuPont and all the big guys were raking in the money from building the weapons. So we don't have anyone to do that now. I think Darian has taken on lots of tasks and works very hard, but she can't do that level of activism that I think is needed now. So I support this idea of an executive director. I think it would empower us on the grassroots level to be able to be more effective.
Well, Sheila and then George.
Okay. Yes, I first of all want to thank Teresa Elamine for recruiting me. She recruited me into Wolf, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. And when I got on to Wolf, because it was during COVID, I happened to see a pediatrician who I had worked with in the past when I was chairing a board for the health center. And I've always known Louise to be very open when I would have conversations with the patients openly in the patient waiting area. And that's what I said, oh, okay. Because I noticed I was the only Black person there. And I said, okay, well, Louise is really cool. And through that process over these years, I find that there are quite a few people within Philadelphia branch that are really cool people. And they have worked with me in conjunction with the anti-racism work. Specifically Sylvia and Pam have been working with me very diligently, almost like as a team. Throughout my observation, one, I've learned a whole lot about a lot of different areas. My observation, though, is that the international branch is a whole lot more welcoming than the U.S. branch. And I almost immediately, when I came to a full meeting of everyone, I saw it. I saw the current president, like, kind of, I don't know. It was strange because I'm not used to, I have been on many boards and volunteer work almost all of my life in addition to, but it's just that I believe in giving back. Uh, I remember I couldn't say anything, and I remember there were no minutes. And then something about the financial, I'm like, what is this? Because I had actually never saw a meeting run like that before, and it was weird. Um, I have invited people to sit on the ART who are members of WILF. One I had known for 50 years, and he's a psychiatrist and Black male psychiatrist who actually is working with a team of psychiatrists to deal with exactly what we're talking about, this anti-racism work. So I invited him, and he came on a few times. And because I know who he is, and because, we're personal friends going back for such a long way, something happened. His son, who is also a physician, died. And I recommended that we as a group, send him a card and let's pull our money together and donate to. He set up a scholarship fund for his son at Temple University Hospital, where his son was a doctor at. And when I recommended it, he was not there, but it was because of the fact that his son had died. When I recommended it, our president said no. And I became pretty uncomfortable about that because and as a matter of fact, Sylvia said, well, wait a minute, he's been coming to these ART meetings, so although he might not be a member of Wolf, he's been a part of these important discussions. Well, it was just dismissed. And I actually shared it with the other ally, Pam, who is working on the ART team. And she brought it up at our last meeting, actually, because she shared with them. She asked me if it was okay for her to share it. And she did. So, but I had to basically recruit somebody else from within Wolf, that was cool. She was part of the cool people that works with me on a team to speak for me because it was immediately shut down. And I didn't like it because, again, Dr. White is a good friend of mine for many, many years. Right now, I am the only African American in the Philadelphia Wolf branch. I have not been actively recruiting anybody, even though I've invited another person to our most recent ART team, and she actually works in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And she comes from a family that's well known. I am not, until I'm more comfortable, because I'm really not comfortable with US Wolf. The international group is welcoming, and I feel as though US Wolf has some really internal work to do. And I don't want to recruit anyone that I know because what happened to Dr. White was upsetting. Okay. So, I want to say that, but at the same time, I have learned, number one, about Wolf's history. And, I'm impressed because they have been at the table with the UN since before the UN started. So I just think that it reflects the overall US whatever in general, I guess. But I'm going to hang in here because I like what Teresa is doing, and I think it's necessary, and I think we need to definitely recruit young people. But until we get that little whatever that is that's not really talked about, and I'm not bringing any more people in because I don't want them to turn around and say, even though Dr. White, he didn't say anything because that's, but I know I can imagine how he felt. So I wanted to add that, but I feel as though Wolf sitting at the table as a recognized group member of the United Nations is critically important. Yes, we have work to do. So that's all I wanted to say. But I wanted to share that because of my personal experience.
All right.
Well, it's very important, Sheila, and we do have a hard stop at 9.
Okay.
And so this has been a really great discussion, and we should look to getting back together again because Robin did bring up this issue of executive director and the fact that there is a history to having executive directors. And I think what has to be looked at is each and every one of those executive directors and what happened when they were executive directors. Because I know some pretty ugly stories about executive directors in Wilf. So it is not the cure-all. It is not. And quite frankly, Robin Wilbeck does an excellent job as administrator in keeping all the pieces going. And the work that we do as so-called volunteer members, nothing can ever change that. We just have to do better at and do more of it. And we need more people in order to do it. So that's a conversation I'm hoping we can organize so we can have it. And let's look at every single director and what happened when they were directors. Because there is a reason why Will does not have an executive director now, because there have been some pretty horrible stories associated with having an executive director from my memory. So just so that that's really clear, and we need to have that conversation, Robin, so that we're not bamboozling people or giving the impression that everything was just great when there were executive directors. Not quite true. So
The current,
George,
the current,
George,
board- the current
George,
board has
can you-
voted to have an executive director.
well, when the membership speaks, what will the board do? Will they listen to the membership? That's where I am right now. I'm not listening to the top down because I've done organization work for a long time, and I know this is a road to hell, actually. So I will fight it, and that's just where I am. So George, can you help me out here? Since we do have a hard stop at 9, I think we have to jump to when can we get back together again, because this clearly is a conversation that should be continued. And I would say sooner rather than later. George, help me out here.
I was looking at a calendar. Good night, Dr. Ridley. If you have to leave immediately, glad you were here. You'll get a recording in a day or so. I was looking at a calendar, and either the last week of February, beginning February 26th, or the second week of March, beginning March 11th, are weeks that I would have time to meet. Just quickly. The week of February 26th or March 11th.
Well, let's look at the week of February 26th. I have something on the 26th. But the Tuesday, the 27th, I'm totally open. And so are people willing to get back together on Tuesday, February 27th?
Yes, for
I
sure.
can do that
Yeah.
That works
earlier.
for me. Anytime in the evening works for me.
If we could do
What
it at
day
6
of the
or
week is
7.
that?
It's a Tuesday. The 27th of February. If we met before 7:30, that would be fine with me. I have an 8:30 meeting that night.
That's rehearsal night for me.
Oh, okay. Another night that week, Teresa, that works for you?
Yeah, Wednesday.
The 28th?
Yeah.
How's it Wednesday, y'all?
So you want to say, what, 6 or 7?
6 is better.
Sue Hilton, can you do a 3 p.m. on Wednesday, the 28th?
I'm driving to San Francisco that day. I think the chances I'll be able to make a meeting are very slight.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
George, why are you coming with 3 p.m. when Robin just said 6 p.m.?
Because Sue Hilton is in Humboldt, California.
Oh, yeah.
The same thought.
To me.
Yeah, same thought.
She's speaking my language.
Oh, I always forget the time difference. You know, we East Coast chauvinists. We forget about you West Coast folks and the 3-hour thing. I'm sorry, Sue. But Sue looks like she's gonna be out of pocket anyway. So can everybody else do 6 on the 28th? Because
Great.
there are people who are missing.
That works for me.
All right.
Okay, well, let's
Yes.
set that date, George. And Robin, I do want us to figure out a way to have an organized discussion, because it's not a fait accompli from my point of view about the executive director. Because that whole process of getting to hire one and what that job should look like, that should all engage the membership. So not just whether we're going to have one, but what should that person be doing? So it's not a quick fix to hire some bureaucrat to come and fix us. It's just throwing good money after a bad idea. It's your money, Robin, but I can't cooperate with somebody who is coming in trying to control what is work that we should be doing as organizers. Sorry, but anyway, we have our meeting date, and I will see you all then, if not sooner. There's a lot going on in February, so I hope people will show up for some of the AHR meetings and the SNCC Women Speak meeting on February 17th. It is not to be missed. And so more information will come out about the upcoming Black History Month meetings. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,
Peace and
Teresa.
blessings, all.
Thank you.
Take
Good night.
care.